Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's Democratic Candidate Forum. Welcome to all the candidates. Thank you for joining us this evening. These Democratic candidates are running for the state representative 19th Suffolk District seat recently vacated by Robert DeLeo, with the primary election set for March 2nd. My name is Betsy Shane. I'm the Executive Director of the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce and will be the moderator for this evening's forum. This forum is provided by the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce, the Winthrop Community Access Television, WCAT. The sponsoring groups neither support nor oppose any candidate, but seek to promote an informed vote, to acquaint the voters with the candidates and issues, and to encourage voter participation in the election. This evening's forum is an opportunity for the Democratic candidates to provide the public with their plans and ideas on the topics provided if they become the House representative for Revere and Winthrop. Tonight's forum is available on WCAT Channel 22, WCAT-TV.org, which is their website, and WCAT Winthrop Facebook page. This will play again on WCAT Channel 22 and WCAT Winthrop YouTube channel. Following health and safety protocols, I am alone in the WCAT studio. Each candidate is coming to us through Zoom, and the staff here at WCAT are following all protocols. Rules for this evening's forum. Candidates will be introduced in the order they appear on the official ballot. Each question thereafter will be asked in rotation, again according to ballot placement. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer all the questions. Each candidate has 90 seconds to answer the question. There is an electronic timer on the screen, which will be used to indicate time intervals. In fairness to all, no candidate will be allowed to continue speaking after the allotted time has expired. They will be muted if they go over the time limit. There also will be no rebuttals. We have questions which have been provided by the residents and business owners from these two communities. The candidates have not seen the questions. We may not get to all the questions due to time limits. Each candidate will have a 2-minute at the end of this forum for closing statements. The order in which the candidates will present their closing statements has been determined prior to this forum. Again, these are the Democratic candidates running for this seat. There are 2 other candidates also running, Paul Caruccio as the Republican candidate and Richard Fusillo as the independent candidate. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Mike Cabral and the staff here at WCAT for all their work in providing this evening's forum. The Democratic candidates this evening are Valentino Capobianco, Alicia Del Vento, Juan Jaramillo, and Jeffrey Turco. Welcome again. Thank you for being here tonight. Okay, we're gonna start with question number 1. And we're doing it in order of ballot, as we had said. So that's Tino, Alicia, Juan, and Jeff. At any time, I'm happy to repeat the question. First question to Tino. The time commitment as a representative has changed over the years. Will you be a full-time state representative? And if not, how will you prioritize your time?
Thank you so much, Betsy, and our friends at the Winthrop Chamber, Mike Cabral, and my good friends and opponents for joining us here this evening. And I really appreciate that question. As a member of the Winthrop School Committee volunteer for the past 5 years, I know just how time-consuming being an elected official could be. And I've done that all as a legislative aide and as a chief of staff. Earlier, and because of that time commitment, I actually decided not to seek re-election as chairman of the school committee 2 years ago. And that's why I resigned as the Airport Hazards Committee because of the time commitment. I quit my job to run for this. I put off a scholarship to Suffolk University for a grad program to run for this. And if and when elected, I will not pursue that. This is a full-time 24/7 commitment. I've seen Speaker DeLeo put the hours in as his legislative aide to make sure he fought for this district every day, day in and day out. There'll be no side hustle with me. I'm 100% committed, and I know the importance of this role, and I have the time to do it. And I am promising my life to the district for the next few years. And as long as I am as long as I'm a member of the House of Representatives. So that's my commitment to the voters. a full-time state representative who puts you first.
Thank you. Okay. Question number 1 goes to Alicia. Would you like me to repeat it?
Nope, I'm all set. And thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Mike, for this evening. I'm happy you brought this question up. I will be a full-time state representative, and I'm so excited about that. When elected, I will be putting my all into this position. Those who know me know I am a fighter and know when I do something, I give it 110%, whether that be the work I've already done with the House of Representatives. That record speaks for itself. So I'm so excited to, if and when elected, be your full-time state representative and continue to deliver for Winthrop and Revere, and continue that great progress that Speaker DeLeo has laid out before us. And I'm excited about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Juan.
Hi, thank you, Betsy, for the question. And thank you to WCAT and the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce for putting this together. As your next state representative, I won't just be your full-time state representative, I will be your overtime state representative. As an organizer, a lifelong organizer in this district, delivering things like minimum wage and paid family and medical leave, I know what it takes to continue to facilitate conversations to ensure that we're properly representing the residents of this district. As a budget director and policy director for Senator Joe Boncory, I know exactly, both as a staffer and just witnessing from his arduous work and the speaker's work, because I actually also interned for him, how tasking this is. I will 100% commit to being a full-time state legislator on behalf of the people of Revere and Winthrop, and I'm honored to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Great question. Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond. I will be a full-time legislator with a part-time practice law on the side. My law practice today is primarily a real estate practice, doing refinances and purchase and sales. And I'll do that. I'll continue to maintain a law practice in the proud tradition that Bob DeLeo started when he started out as a state representative and maintained a law practice. And of course, as your responsibilities grow in the legislature, then you'll have to adjust down. And I think ultimately when the speaker became chairman of Ways and Means, he closed down his practice. And if I'm fortunate enough in the future to become chairman of Ways and Means, then I'll give up my law practice at that time. But in the meantime, I'll be a full-time state representative fighting for the people of this district, while at the same time providing for my family with my part-time practice law on the side. Thanks for the great question.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, question number 2. We'll start, the order will be Alicia, Juan, Jeff, and Tino. The past few years, our nation has been reckoning with systematic racism and vast inequities that our marginal communities face daily. The pandemic has exacerbated these already present failures, which manifest in people of color having lack of access to quality education, transportation, healthcare, sufficient nutrition, affordable housing, and employment. These inequities happen in every town and city, including Winthrop and Revere. What are 2 specific policies or initiatives that you would plan to introduce or support as our state representative to address these inequities to bring meaningful, lasting changes? Alicia.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate the question. I first want to acknowledge my privilege as a cisgender white woman in this community and the privileges and where I've been and what I've received because of that. And I'm committed to working with and in community to make sure that we continue to move past and move and work in these systems to make them better and dismantle any systemic racism. Because I see things through the lens of my public health background, that's where I start, because racial justice is also economic, environmental, and health justice. The 2 specific policies for me that I'd be really excited to work on. First is reproductive justice legislation. Low-income women and women of color still face so many barriers to reproductive care, whether that is their maternal care, whether that's around pro-choice legislation. There is a jarring gap in the maternal mortality rate, and particularly with Black and white women. And secondly, I'd be so excited to champion legislation addressing access to democracy, which so often shuts out people of color. We need to make sure we're expanding mail-in voting. I would love to make day registration, so you can vote day of election and register the day of election to make sure that everyone has the chance to be involved in our democratic process, because we know right now there is racism rooted in a lot of those voter registration policies.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Juan, do you need me to read it again?
No, all set. Thank you so much, Betsy. I'll start with a little bit of my story. I'm a formerly undocumented immigrant from Colombia. This community saved us from violence that my parents and I were fleeing there. Along that line, I became the first person of color to ever run for any position in the city of Revere, and the first person of color to ever run for this particular seat. My organizing work has centered the most vulnerable communities in our district. As a youth organizer, I worked on behalf of our communities that are environmental justice communities to ensure that we had strong coastal resiliency projects, and that we're holding people like Massport and Willbrader accountable for the pollution that causes high asthma and COPD rates among our community members, in particular our Black and Brown community members. So I'll be ensuring to fight them to make sure that our communities are healthier. Further, as I mentioned, my first language is actually Spanish, and I will be fighting to ensure that we have language access from the State House to City Hall to ensure that everyone has equitable access to government. I am a big believer in our government because it saved us. I come from an unstable government that fed a lot of violence, and therefore I will be fighting for these communities in these ways.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Thank you. The two specific programs I would do, first, I think racial justice is obviously an important factor, but I also think a large part of this is socioeconomic. And people at the lower end of the economic scale have been just as harmed and damaged by the pandemic. And I think it's important to recognize them. And so two of the ways that I think, or two specific proposals that I would have, one is the legislature passed a 7-year funding mechanism to fully fund our public schools. And there's some talk of using the pandemic as an excuse to either push back the full funding, delay it a year, and I'm adamantly opposed to that. I think it's important that the legislature meet its obligation, because education is the great equalizer. If every day that our schools are closed, every day that our kids are deprived the opportunity to have a fully funded school system, those kids lose and you can't recover it. And so it's critically important that we as elected officials take a stand and fight to fully fund our public education system. The second part of this is I'd work with our unions and our businesses to increase economic opportunity in our inner cities and in our communities. It's critical to expand economic opportunity, because there's nothing better to help people with upward mobility than a good, hardworking, paying union job, or working for a company that values and appreciates them. So I look forward to working on those two proposals to improve our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Tino.
Thank you, Betsy. Without question, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery have forced all of us to be more cognizant of what is happening in the country regarding race relations. And I believe the role of an elected official is to show up and to listen. And that's what I've done this past year, attended multiple Black Lives Matter marches, including the one in Winthrop. I believe we need to increase our minimum wage beyond $15 an hour. We need to reinstate time and a half on Sunday for our retail workers who are at the front line of this pandemic. And we need to fully implement our Student Opportunity Act, which, if is fully implemented, Winthrop and Revere combined will receive an overall $12.5 million budget increase in Chapter 70 funding. I'll be a state representative that believes we need to invest in jobs and education and not jails and mass incarceration. We need to treat the opioid epidemic as a mental illness and not a crime. And once and for all, our generation needs to beat that stigma once and for all. Thank you for the question, Betsy.
Thank you. All right, question number 3. Our order will be Juan, Jeff, Tino, and Alicia. Juan, there are 351 communities in the Commonwealth. Bob DeLeo directed a lot of resources to Winthrop and Revere. How will you work with other members of the legislature to ensure that Winthrop and Revere's needs are met? And what areas do you consider priorities?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question, Betsy, because I'm actually the only person in this stage that has already worked within the legislature to deliver millions of dollars in funding for Winthrop and Revere. I did so by getting money for recovery coaches for CASA and getting the seed funding money for the Revere Substance Use Disorder Initiative. Additionally, I got millions of dollars of funding for coastal resiliency projects here, and as well as money to expand the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center here. And what that tells you is that I have the relationships in the building to get started on day one and begin delivering. I remember you meeting with you multiple times to talk about the work of the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce and supporting that work, and working with Speaker DeLeo and with Senator Boncory to make sure that you had adequate funding to continue to support the vital small businesses in Winthrop and Revere. So, I will lean on those relationships and those bridges that I spent such a long time building, both with you and the community and in the legislature, to continue to deliver for the residents here. And I really look forward to doing that, because this is my life's work, and I'm honored I'd be honored to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Yes, I mean, at the end of, in order to, nobody's going to come into this position. None of us on this forum is going to come into the position and have the influence that Speaker DeLeo had. I mean, for 20 years, he was either chairman of Ways and Means or Speaker of the House of Representatives. And before that, let's not forget, we had Senate President Travellini representing us. So we're coming through sort of the completion of what I call the golden age of Winthrop politics. And that's why it's so critically important to elect someone that has the ability to get up to Beacon Hill, not just go along to get along, but also to work with people, let them know that you're going to put the time in, you're going to learn the job, you're going to learn the important pieces of the budget so you can make sure that you direct money back to your community. You're going to work and build relationships with people. That's critical. And what I did when I was town council president, working with the Seaport Bond Advisory Council to get money to help deal with rebuilding some of the critically damaged seawalls in this town, to protect some of our infrastructure in the town, working with the Mass Water Resource Authority to get grant money to help assist the town. You know, I'm proud of that and what I've accomplished. And I'm also proud of the, you know, a lot of the litany of funds that have come to Winthrop that Juan talked about. You know, Senator Boncory and Speaker DeLeo, I think, frankly, deserve the thanks for their effort in bringing the money. I was a staffer once, and staff members certainly help their bosses get funding in a budget. But let's not confuse ourselves. The senator and speaker are the ones that brought that money to Winthrop, and I'll be the one that brings it to us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Tino.
Thank you. As a volunteer member of the Winthrop Airport Hazards Committee, I worked with my colleagues on the committee, you know, Mr. Falbo, Mr. Biggs, Don Quirk, and Gina Cassetta, in working with Congresswoman Catherine Clark's office to receive, to have Congress release mitigation funding for our Precinct 3 Point Shirley residents for additional soundproofing through Massport. And as state representative, I'll make sure that that funding is released to our community. As a member of the Winthrop School Committee, I worked with former Council President Ron Vecchia to go to the Town Council and receive an extra additional $150,000 beyond our Chapter 70 allocations in order to save proposed layoffs by our, for kindergarten ESPs by our former superintendent. So I think I have experience in my own right as an elected official and committee official in terms of bringing home the extra resources to Winthrop, along with my experience as legislative aide for Speaker DeLeo, and obviously as chief of staff of Senator Paul Feeney, would assist him with his budget priorities in his district.
Great, thank you, Tino. Alicia.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this question. Having been a former staffer on the House Ways and Means, working directly on the state's budget, I just want to correct that I've already worked on delivering for Winthrop and Revere, and with the other 160 members of the House of Representatives. I have the most current relationships in the House of Representatives, both with leadership and rank and file members, as well as staffers, having just been working there for the past 4 years. I am ready to continue delivering for Winthrop. I know this budget process inside and out, specifically within the House of Representatives, as that is extremely different even than the Senate process. And I'm ready to fight for Winthrop and Revere. I pride myself on relationship making. That is one of my biggest strengths, both inside the building and outside of the building. I know losing the speaker, we're losing a champion, but I will be ready on day one when we're still legislating virtually to put my relationships to the test, to deliver for Winthrop and Revere and make sure that we are continuing to get the resources that we so deserve.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, question number 4. The order is Jeff, Tino, Alicia, Juan. Jeff, though COVID could be over in late 2021 or 2022, its effects will affect small businesses for a number of years. As businesses struggle to survive these challenging times, what measures will you support to make sure that small businesses can stay in business?
Well, one of the things that I've done locally as a trustee of the Winthrop Foundation, we sat down as trustees and we said, how can we help our small businesses that are hurting so bad because of COVID and because of the shutdowns? And we looked at our charter and our obligations as part of the foundation to help our community at large. What we did was we voted to buy $750 in gift cards and $25 increments from each of the food service establishments in our town, approximately 31. And we bought those gift cards and then donated them to the food pantry so that people in need could benefit from the gift cards, but also our small business owners would get some needed relief. That was a small step that we took on a community level. The state level, the governor has rolled out a plan where they're giving grants to small businesses. I talked to a Revere business owner just the other day who just received $25,000 to help deal with the burden of what's happening. We also have at the federal level, they're working on the COVID relief package that will bring much needed money. There is a PPP program that's out right now in phase 2, which still has not exhausted the money. So there's a lot of money out there. And one of the things I'll do as a state representative is go into the community and talk to the small business community and let them know what money is available. Because the problem with government today is it's such a large labyrinth of programs that the typical person on the street doesn't understand what's out there. And so it's my job as the state representative to go out and bring the government to the people so they know how to take advantage of the programs and get the money. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Tino.
Thank you. A lot of businesses learned to adapt during this pandemic. In my role as chief of staff, I assisted the senator with drafting legislation allowing restaurant and delivery orders to include the use of alcohol. And I think that's worked and provided some small relief. And I think that should continue, along with the addition of outdoor dining. I think that was a fun experience for everyone this past summer, and it seemed to work. And I think that's something that should stick. Also, I think we could take a look at our rainy day fund. It should be used for situations just like this and give funding to vital programs in this time of crisis. We also need to expand revenue. And I think we need to lift regulations on sports betting. Massachusetts is losing additional revenue every day to neighboring states. But with expanding gambling addiction, we also need to provide services to serve addiction. And during this crisis, I believe a lot of funding needs to be front and center for our workers, and any aid provided by the government needs to go directly to small business owners.
Thank you, Tino. Alicia.
Thank you. I think we need to make sure that our small businesses don't just survive COVID, but they thrive in COVID. We know before COVID, it was already hard for small businesses to get up and running, to survive when they're tasked against Amazon and big corporations. And we're so lucky in the city of Revere and in the town of Winthrop to have so many incredible small businesses of folks that also live here too. But we need to make sure that we continue to allow them to thrive. Massachusetts needs to put forward and pass an economic relief bill similar to what we've done on the federal level. We're one of the richest states in the country, and we need to make sure that we're getting relief out. We're passing legislation that allows that relief to trickle down to our small businesses, specifically so that we can have small business grants, any relief to make sure that they're, like I said, thriving continuously. As well as, COVID-19 dollars are going to continue to come through the federal government. And I've been calling on Governor Baker and holding him accountable throughout COVID-19. And, when elected, I would hold Governor Baker accountable to make sure these dollars are going directly to the businesses like Katie's Kitchen, like Robin's Nest, and not Amazon or these larger groups, because they're the groups that need to make sure they see the dollars firsthand.
Thank you, Alicia. Juan.
Thank you for your question, Betsy. So as political coordinator for the largest labor worker union in the country, I've led the fight with my union at the federal level, working with the delegations in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut to deliver the PPP program that is helping small businesses today. So I would continue that fight with stakeholders and my friends in the federal government to ensure that we're expanding that. Also working with you on the work that you do in the Chamber of Commerce. to ensure that we're providing technical and financial assistance, right, and that the state is allowing for that and providing that. I would echo what Alicia said too. We do have to hold corporations accountable to good paying union jobs and support small businesses. And that means holding Amazon, who has a warehouse here, to those things, right? To making sure that they're supporting small businesses, right? I personally shop at Etsy over Amazon for a lot of now because they actually have a really good initiative. I will continue to fight for these things, and I will work to ensure that we continue to have stimulus that will put money in people's pockets so they can come out and spend it in our communities.
Thank you, Juan. Okay, question number 5. Tino, Alicia, Juan, Jeff. With the federal minimum wage potentially on the horizon, do you believe the minimum wage will need to be increased in Massachusetts in conjunction with our cost of living? Would you consider a tiered minimum wage based on age or volume of business similar to other states? And the third part of this is, do you support a $15 an hour minimum wage? Tino.
I fully support increasing the minimum wage beyond $15 an hour, along with inflation. I think this is something that could be accomplished right here in Massachusetts because Massachusetts leads. And when working people continue to have a job and make money, it helps the entire economy. It's the right thing to do. It's something we could do as leaders, and it doesn't take multiple legislative sessions to do. It takes Democrats with a backbone, with empathy, and with political courage. And I believe we could do it here. I think it's something Democrats could work with Republicans alike, because when the middle class and unions are thriving, that means we're all thriving. And increasing the minimum wage beyond $15 an hour is step one into making sure we have a prosperous middle class.
Thank you. Alicia, do you need me to repeat the question?
If you don't mind, yeah.
Okay. With the federal minimum wage potentially on the horizon, do you believe the minimum wage will need to be increased in Massachusetts in conjunction with our cost of living? Would you consider a tiered minimum wage based on age or volume of business similar to other states? And do you support a $15 an hour minimum wage?
I 100% support a $15 minimum wage, and we have to continue, yes, to increasing with inflation. We have to make sure that we're continuing to monitor that and make sure that no one has to work more than one job to continue to live here, especially in the 19th Suffolk district. And everyone deserves that fair wage. It doesn't matter if it's if it's a high school student, or if it's working a summer job, or if it's someone's day-to-day job. Everyone deserves to earn their fair share of a wage.
Great, thank you. Juan.
Thank you, Betsy, for that question. I do believe, I work for a labor union now, and I do believe that we need to tie the cost of living adjustment to the minimum wage. But I'll tell you a little bit about my story. My parents each worked 80-hour weeks, and that's what catapulted my interest in public service. And so I began working with some young people. I was really young at the time, to expand the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I actually worked with Speaker DeLeo at the time, when I was still a young person, to make sure that we didn't have a sub-minimum wage for young people. So I thank you for that. Additionally, I got paid family and medical leave done with the Raise Up Coalition, which I was working with. And so I fully support a $15 federal minimum wage. If we put money in people's pockets, we're going to make sure that money is more than all the studies indicate that money stays in local communities compared to when we put it to big corporations. So one way that we support small businesses is making sure that everyone's making a fair living wage. And that's why I fight every single day for strong jobs and a good paying union job. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff?
Yes, thank you. So I do support indexing the minimum wage to inflation. I think that that way it prevents the need to constantly go back and have the refight the same issue every few years in Massachusetts. I'm inclined not to support a tier wage, but what I am concerned about is some of the small business owners, and I'm a small business owner myself, is that we've seen with the Showcase Cinema being closed, you know, dozens of jobs for young kids went by the wayside as Amazon moves in and helps put small businesses out in favor of Amazon. You know, we look at, you know, the opportunities for younger kids to work. And so I would sit down and I would say to you, just go talk to your local supermarket here in Winthrop and ask what happens when you raise the minimum wage and don't have a tiered wage. One of the things that they do is they turn around and hire more full-time people, and they reduce opportunities for younger kids. And so I'm inclined not to support it, but I want to hear from people in the business community about how it'll affect them. And is it going to leave our kids with the inability to get a job? In the $15 minimum wage, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a part of the stimulus bill in Washington. And I think that we need to sit down and talk about where that is. I think that the $15 minimum wage is probably a good number, but we ought to look at it, make sure it's not going to cost us jobs overall in the Commonwealth. So yes, I'd support it, absent some data that says we would lose more jobs than we benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, question number 6, starting with Alicia, then Juan, Jeff, and Tino. Please share how you plan to support your youngest constituents, the students of the Winthrop and Revere public schools, in addition to all public school children of the Commonwealth, and their need for in-person learning.
Betsy, I'm so excited. Here we go.
Yep.
Sorry. I'm excited you brought up that question. I got my start as a public servant in the Winthrop Public Schools. I had some incredible teachers that really allowed us to take leadership positions at a young age within the community, whether that was organizing for overrides, you know, whether that was organizing in our community. I feel so grateful for that. And I would continue to reach out. I want, like I said earlier, or previously in my campaign, I'm going to have an open door policy. I want to lead with and in community. And that includes with some of our youngest folks, students of the Winthrop Public Schools and students of the Revere Public Schools, and making sure we're listening to them, especially in these trying times of COVID. Our students have been affected severely with the changes in their academic structure, with being at home, with going hybrid, and this is at no fault of their own. And we need to make sure that when we're moving forward, whether that to be in-person learning in our next steps, that students are at the table for those decisions. And I would allow any student to be in my office, while that may be virtually for a while, to hear their thoughts and lean on them, because I haven't been through this as a child in COVID, as a young person. And I want to make sure that their voices are at the table for that.
Juan.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Betsy. One way that we actually support young people is by paying them a good, strong wage, because a lot of the people in this district in particular, a lot of the young people actually work to help out in their homes. So I'll start with that. Further, I am lucky to say that I've been honored by the endorsement of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which represents all of the teachers in both Winthrop and Revere. So with that in mind, I'm going to continue to work with young people to ensure that we're working with them to bring them back fully to the schools, by ensuring that there's good, adequate infrastructure in our public schools, by ensuring that we've put teachers and staff at the front lines of the vaccination, by working to ensure that we have all the necessary support programs that families may need in order to bring our kids back to school. I'll be fighting for those things alongside with our community members, our parents, having conversations with our parents, because I'm an organizer. I've been an organizer my whole life. These are things I've already been working on, ensuring that we have youth voice. I was a youth organizer with Revere Youth in Action, and that's how I got my feet wet in public service. So you better believe that I'm going to continue to support the young people in this district, and I'd be proud to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on a year now where our school children have been damaged severely by this pandemic and by the closure of our schools. I think that we as elected officials need to demand that our schools be reopened. I think that our kids need to be in the schools. They need to be in the schools safely. We need to put the resources necessary to open those schools. We can't vacillate and one day say we're going to follow the CDC, the next day we're going to follow DPH, next day we're going to follow DESE. We need to tell our superintendents we will give us a plan that will safely open our schools. We have new schools in Winthrop. You know, our superintendent, I think, has done a marvelous job trying to get us back on track and trying to get the schools open as best we can. I think we need to do what in Winthrop, what the superintendent's done is give families the opportunity to go full remote if they so elect. I think in Revere, the school's been closed since last year, and I think it's tragic. I think that the people have the right to demand that those schools be reopened, and they need to be reopened post haste. It is not fair to the school children of this Commonwealth to be denied an adequate education and put them in front of a Zoom. Any parent, the only good thing that's come out of it is parents have had the opportunity to watch what's happening, and I think parents are starting to rise up and say the schools need to be open. Period. That's going to be priority number one, and the sole focus is to reopen the schools. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Tino.
Betsy, thank you for this question. And as the only current elected official in this race and a member of the Winthrop School Committee for the past 5 years, in Shore Collaborative Board of Trustees in Chelsea for the past 4 years, I've faced this pandemic head on. I know what it's like to lose 2 students and a teacher because of this virus. And I also know what it's like to receive the phone call from a teacher concerned about return to in-person learning, and also receiving the call and hearing the fear and the crack in a parent's voice of the fact that their students, they're concerned about their child's social and emotional health, when just last year, they might have been a straight A student or a 3-sport athlete. Our students have to get back to school in a safe and timely manner. This is why in December, I worked with my colleagues, with Julie DeMarco and Gus Martucci, to have an orientation period. It's reduced class sizes for hybrid learning, just to get our kids back in, to see their friends and get used to what's going on in January. And I agree with President Biden, what he said on Inauguration Day. Kids need to be back in school for in-person learning within the next 100 days. And I think our superintendent, who has done a great job handling this, is putting forth her plan at the first meeting in March. And I look forward to voting in favor of her plan. And, you know, our students are strong and they're resilient. And we should all thank our students for their sacrifice during this time, because I think they know deep down that they're making a difference. And I think the state needs to kick in and allow the option for them to not have this year count towards their record. But I'm proud of the work I've done. I know I've taken some tough votes, and I might have lost some support because of it. But I can look myself in the mirror before I go to bed every night, fighting to make sure each kid has the access to the best education possible right here in Winthrop and at the Shore Collaborative Board in Chelsea.
Thank you. Question number 7. The order will be Juan, Jeff, Tino, Alicia. What policies would you put forward as a member of the legislature that would make Winthrop and Revere more resilient to the effects of climate change? Juan.
Thank you, Betsy, for that question. As an environmental justice community, this is the challenge of our times. As a political coordinator for the largest labor union in the country, the first labor union to endorse the Green New Deal, I believe that we have the tools to do that in Massachusetts to protect our residents. I've done that already in the legislature, but by working with Speaker Belito and as a budget director for Senator Boncory to bring coastal resiliency projects here, to ensure that we're doing dredging projects. That's stuff, in fact, one of the things that I've discussed in environmental bond bills that unfortunately weren't signed into law by the governor. We got money for different projects, including the seawall and at Short Beach, and monies for other coastal resiliency projects, by ensuring that we're protecting the marsh, holding developers accountable to ensure that the marsh is protected, because that's a storm buffer for our homes here. So these are things that I'm going to be fighting for on day one, because I've already been doing it for a long time. holding Will Brader, like I said, and Massport accountable to the health and well-being of our residents, have them invest in a lot of these projects, because our community's viability is their viability just the same. So I'm going to be working on that, Betsy. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Yes, so this is a sort of a multi-pronged approach. I mean, the first thing is I'm proud to say I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And one of the things that I'll do as the state representative is sit down with people in the climate change community and talk to the best and brightest minds that are available to me as a state representative to get ideas on how to improve the situation. You know, I'm not going to go in there as a brand new state representative with no science background and wave a magic wand to solve a problem that some of the best minds in the world haven't been able to solve. But what I'll look at, though, is a couple of things. One is some things I know don't work. California, which pushed to get rid of carbon and go strictly towards solar and wind, has had rolling blackouts and brownouts throughout the course of the year. We see Texas, which everyone thinks is a carbon state, has started to rely more and more on solar and wind, and they got an unexpected cold snap, and they have literally millions of people today freezing without power. And so it's critically important that when we put together a plan, we think it through and make sure that we have a backup plan so that we protect our communities and we protect ourselves. The other thing with respect to Wheeler Brader, as a member of the Revere Beach Partnership Board, I led the effort for the first time in our 17-year history to say, no, we won't take money from Wheeler Brader when they offered us the $25,000 a year as a donation, because I looked at it and said, we care about the environment, we care about the marsh, and we care about the beach. And we're not going to take their dirty money. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Tino.
Thank you. We must lead on these issues at the State House. We have a duty to address inequalities to leading communities in this district bearing the brunt of environmental burdens. More money needs to be going to investments in green projects in frontline communities like Winthrop and Revere. And we need to transition away from fossil fuels. That means investing in our public transportation system and renewable energy to make it accessible for all. These projects will bring well-paying union jobs in this area, which is why I support extending the Blue Line to Lynn from Wonderland. We need to keep environmental protections and climate change in the mind of all these new developments. And Winthrop High School is actually a great example of this. It's able to withstand sea level rise while also producing clear energy through solar panels that I was able to get on its unused roof while I was chair of the school committee. And as your next state representative, I pledge to be open, honest, transparent, and accessible. I have a record of leading on issues of sustainability and advocacy, and I'm ready to lead on day one at the State House as your next state representative.
Thank you, Tino. Alicia.
Thank you. I'm proud to say I do have a background in science. My public health background is deeply rooted in the environmental health background. That's why when I say we need bold and aggressive action on climate change and we need it now, I'm not messing around, and neither is the environmental movement. I was proud to be the principal organizer for Senator Ed Markey here in Winthrop and work for a climate champion. And that's why we need to make sure we're protecting our vital neighborhoods like Beachmont and Point Shirley that are continued to have flooding. Short Beach used to be closed for flooding, every couple of years. Now it's 2 to 3 years that we have to close that. That is a direct result of climate change. That's why we need to make sure we transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies. And that transition happens quickly. We're running out of time. And good climate change policy is good economic policy. The businesses on Revere Beach, and right on Shore Drive will not survive if we do not take these direct actions now. We need to invest in green collar jobs and make sure that the education is there, that everyone can enter these fields of work. It's the only way that we're going to be able to continue to have this thriving economy. The climate change movement is not mutually exclusive from the affordable housing movement when we're building housing, as well as our transportation movement. These do not work in silos, and I'm committed to passing aggressive climate policy on the state level.
Thank you. Question 8. The order is Jeff, Tino, Alicia, Juan. What do you feel are the most important aspects to focus on when working on development in smaller communities?
Well, most of the development decisions obviously are made at the local level. It's subject to local zoning. It's subject to the boards of appeal and the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. And so as a state representative, we sort of, we deal with that more as a citizen of the community than we do as a state representative. But to the extent that policy is being formulated at the state level, one of the things I would work on is I do think that we need greater affordability, needs to be part of any type of expanded development. But I think the community matters. I mean, some of the way that some of our community, just drive around Winthrop right now and look at some of the monstrosities that have been built in this town, overpowering single family homes. There's a problem with our zoning. Again, it's not something that we'll deal with at the state level on these specific issues, but all you need to do is drive around the town and see some of the properties and say, how are we allowing this? They're out of character with the neighborhoods. They don't take consideration of the local neighbors. And I think that that's something that the community needs to work on. And one of the things I'll do as a state representative is work at the local level to give my guidance and my thoughts on how to improve our zoning so that we deal with affordable housing appropriately and we deal with development, but we deal with it in a way that respects neighbors and respects communities. And we're Winthrop. We're not Somerville. I didn't move to Winthrop 16 years ago to live in Somerville. I moved here because I like a small town atmosphere, and it's critical we don't lose that.
Thank you. Tino.
Thank you, Betsy. And I think this is more of a question for a town manager, but I think my role as a state representative is to be a friend and a fighter for elected officials and stakeholders in the district, including local boards of appeals and zoning boards. My job as a state rep would be to fight for adequate funding and grants for certain projects when needed, just as Speaker DeLeo did a few years ago, fighting for the Center Business District and those grants. So that'll be my job, working with the Economic Development Committee and making sure that if there's a penny or a dollar out there, that it's getting directly to the community of Revere and Winthrop to add additional relief on taxpayers for funding these projects locally at home.
Thank you. Alicia.
Thank you. So this is personal to me. I want to stay here. I want to raise my family here. And I'm getting nervous because simply I don't know if I'd be able to continue to afford to live here and raise a family here. That's why when we plan for our community, we must be doing some smart development and making sure that we're investing and any growth happening is not pushing folks out. And I'd be happy and excited to work with our municipal leaders and our town manager to make sure, what's the best path forward? How are we going to move? And we can't look at it in the next 1 to 2 years. We have to start talking about this in the next 20 to 40 years, especially while down the street, we're going to have a new neighborhood in Suffolk Downs developed. We need to make sure that the community has a seat at the table and that we're really planning, because we need to make sure that folks are still able to stay here, raise a family here, while at the same time we're growing. And if we are developing, it's smart and with community at the center of it.
Great, thank you. Juan.
Thank you for the question, Betsy. So one of the things that we should be looking at for new development is obviously sustainability. We just talked about the effects of climate change that we're facing in our coastal communities, right? I sat on the board, and I started on the advisory committee for Suffolk Downs, where I advocated for LEED buildings, which mean they're buildings that are sustainable, right? That they're green buildings, right? To ensure that we have new development, not just in Revere, but in Winthrop as well, that does fit the character, that does take into account the needs of the community, that does not encroach on our natural resources, right? Further, like Alicia, I don't know how much further I can continue to live in here if we don't do something about affordability, right? We have to invest in workforce housing, right? Like, I don't make a small wage. I'm lucky like that. I work in a labor union and I make a decent wage, but still, it's hard for me to live here, right? My family, I'm engaged and I plan to raise my family here once we get married next month. But we're really, affordability is an issue. We're going to continue to make sure that we have development that fits the character of the community and support residents that want to continue to live here, right? And that's things that I'll be working with local stakeholders, with my friends in municipal government to ensure that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Question 9. The order is Tino, Alicia, Juan, and Jeff. If elected, what will you do to protect the residents of Winthrop and Revere from the noise and air pollution created by a growing international airport? Please include in your response whether you accepted political donations from Massport, and if so, how will that impact your ability to balance the airport's goals of expansion with the health and safety goals of your constituents?
Thank you.
Tino?
To the best of my knowledge, I have not received a political donation from a current or former Massport employee. And as a member of the Airport Hazards, a former member of the Airport Hazards Committee, the first thing I will do, as I said earlier, is continue to work with Congresswoman Clark's office to make sure that that mitigation money for additional soundproofing for Point Shirley residents is received right away. I fully recognize Massport's economic viability to our district. I'm the only candidate here that actually worked to hold them accountable. I've attended meetings there. We've sat at the table and we walked out in full disagreement with them. And just as I did for Point Shirley, I'm going to fight for the entire district. Just like East Boston, Winthrop and Revere deserves its fair share of mitigation. In terms of additional relief for Winthrop and Revere to get their fair share of East Boston, I will also, just like Bob DeLeo did, I will actually file legislation to make sure that we pay the same toll-free when we enter the Callahan and Ted Williams Tunnel. It's not fair that East Boston receives additional mitigation that Winthrop and Revere doesn't. And as a state rep, I'll be on the front lines fighting with our neighbors to make sure we get what is rightfully ours.
Thank you. Alicia.
Thank you. I have, first and foremost, have not taken any Massport dollars. I appreciate that question. You know, Winthrop and Revere to continue to face the burden of Massport, and in Revere, our folks know as well as the Wheelabrator, we continue to face the issues of noise pollution, air pollution, and light pollution. Our elected officials need to hold these institutions accountable. You know, and I would be working hand in hand with fellow elected officials as well as community advocates to make sure that we're working with Massport in that, you know, we are making sure that they're not increasing that noise. I support fees for red-eye flights and to go to Massport for soundproofing to continue these efforts. You know, instead of that going right to the Massport General Fund. I think we need to look at these issues and make sure that Winthrop and Revere get its fair share of mitigation from Massport, as well as getting creative to make sure that with an increased flight pattern, we're not continuing, neighbors aren't continuing to be harassed by the noise. And I'd stand hand in hand, you know, with our community advocates.
Thank you. Juan.
Thank you for the question, Betsy. So absolutely. So we have to hold a Massport accountable, and we have to get the adequate mitigation money that we need because of the air pollution, because of the noise pollution, right? Our residents deserve more. And so we have to continue to work with our local stakeholders as well to make sure that we're putting up a good united front as it relates to this issue. They're making a lot of money here. And, you know, we want to just hold them accountable to the things that they're bringing to the community. Further, to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe I have received any money from Massport. And if I do, I just don't think I have received it. I certainly have not requested it. And so that's where I'm at on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff.
Thank you. So, I mean, we start with the premise that Logan Airport's not going anywhere. You know, we're stuck with it. We live here. It lives there, and it's not leaving. So the beginning of your question, I haven't taken any contributions or received any or solicited any contributions from any of the leadership at Massport. Obviously, the agency itself doesn't give contributions. I did receive $500 from the Teamsters Local 25 union in support of my campaign, and they represent the large number of workers at the airport. So to the extent you consider that a Massport-related contribution, that I did receive that, but it's from a union, not from anybody that in Massport leadership. A number of years ago when they built the new runway, after decades of litigation and court orders saying they couldn't build it, one of the promises was that it was going to change the flight patterns. It was going to reduce the noise pollution in our area. And unfortunately, because the communities in the south part of the harbor, Weymouth, and communities like that, Quincy, they made the most noise in terms of the noise complaint line. And so as a result, the FAA pushed Massport to redirect flights back here. And so we haven't seen the relief that we need. So one of the things I'll do as a state representative is work with the community in the town to really push and let people know it's critical that you make your noise complaints, because the FAA does look at that type of stuff. That's critically important. And also pollution itself from burning rubber. I live on Court Road and I watch the plumes of burning rubber when the planes land. And the CDC says burning rubber is a carcinogen, puts us all at risk. So I'll work to fight that Massport do right by this community and redirect the flights in a different direction so we don't bear the full burden. Thank you. Sorry for going over.
Thank you.
Betsy, for transparency purposes, I'd like to acknowledge that I also received $500 from Teamsters Local 25 as well, just to be clear.
Okay, thank you. Question 10. The order is Alicia, Juan, Jeff, and Tino. If elected, what will you do to leverage Winthrop's geographical relationship with the MWRA to deliver lower water bills to the residents of Winthrop? Alicia.
Thank you for this question, Betsy. You know, I'm proud to have been endorsed by MOSIS, the Massachusetts Organization of Scientists and State Engineers, which represent a lot of the technicians and chemists down at MWRA. And I'm excited to work on that relationship and to work forward in any mode we can to make sure that we can bring the water bills down for folks in Winthrop, as we know that that's severely affected many homeowners and many property owners. You know, I want to make sure that going in there, we can negotiate and mitigate any decreases. And I'd get creative in doing that work. Like I said, I have the most current relationships, having just worked in the House of Representatives with the folks that I'd be going into negotiations with and figuring out how we can make sure that Winthrop, you know, is paying a fair rate. And I'm excited to do that work.
Thank you. Juan.
Thank you, Betsy, for the question. Obviously, we have to work with our state partners in ensuring that the people here in Winthrop and Revere are paying lower rates. I know that the water rates around here oftentimes place an undue burden to our residents and to our homeowners. We want to also make sure that we are helping homeowners with programs to ensure that their meters are up to date and that we're adequately charging them for whatever water they use and not using extra. So ensuring that we have state programming to kind of lower rates for folks. Additionally, I think that in terms of leveraging our geographical location, right? I know that, as you know, we border Boston, so we want to make sure we're working across jurisdictions to see what's working in other municipalities close to us that have large consumptions of water like ours, to ensure that we can provide the best service at the lowest rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff.
So this is really a multi-pronged approach. First, one of the injustices with the way the MWRA bills is the people of some 50 plus communities out of 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth bear the burden of paying the cost to clean up Boston Harbor. Boston Harbor is an economic engine for the entire Commonwealth, yet only the communities in the set district have to pay the freight. So that's one thing that we need to look at. But the reality is, the political reality is, with 351 cities and towns, some 300 of them not affected by the district, it'll be a pretty tough road to hoe to get them to do right and to fix the law to make it a Commonwealth burden instead of just the people in the district. But the second part of this, I want to give kudos to Winthrop's town manager. A couple of years ago, he proposed that the town engage in audit of the water sewer funds. And inexplicably, the town council voted down the audit request. Truth be told, the town of Winthrop charges some $10 or $11 million for water sewer services to the ratepayer. The MWRA charges half that to the town. So the town charges a full 100%, almost 100% above and beyond what's charged by the ratepayer. And this is sort of minutiae of town government, but the reality is the town of Winthrop is overcharging, in my humble opinion, is overcharging the ratepayers of this town for water sewer. The first step in the process is to do an audit of it, to look. There's a statute that set up the MWRA that specifically says the towns can only charge the actual cost the MWRA charges plus the actual cost, direct cost to deliver. And Winthrop charges above and beyond that, and the same problems going on now in Revere. Thank you.
Thank you. Tino.
The first thing I would do is work with Auditor Bump in her office to make sure we have a full audit on how it got so high in this town and what we could do to stop it. I believe I have the relationships and the knowledge to do that on day one. And I have many conversations with elected officials, with reps and senators regarding this issue, because as my friend Mr. Turco alluded to it, Winthrop is not alone in this. This is something that reps are hearing from their constituents every single day. And that's why I would work with them to file legislation to cap water rate increases per year. 15 to 20% in over 2 to 3 years is ludicrous. That's why I support filing legislation that would cap a yearly water increase of 2% in every single town throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Question 11. Order is Juan, Jeff, Tino, Alicia. Juan, prior to the pandemic, Boston had been ranked #1 for congestion nationwide 2 years in a row. Winthrop is not immune to this disturbing trend that negatively impacts our health, our environment, and our economy. What policy initiatives would you support or put forward to decrease vehicular traffic on our roads and make it easier, more appealing, and more convenient to travel by transit or other non-drive along modes like biking, walking, or ride sharing?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited that you asked this question, Betsy. So we need to institute a fare free MBTA system. The MBTA, the fee to ride the T right now is a tax on working class people. And if we can remove that tax from them, we will actually be catalyzing economic growth for our small businesses here in Revere and in Winthrop, and in Revere. Further, I would make sure that I'm fighting for an investment in our public transportation infrastructure, connecting the red blue, working with Senator Boncory and Representative Madaro in East Boston to connect the red and the blue lines to ensure that we have more access to this district via the MBTA. Working with our local stakeholders and municipalities to think about a program where we have designated bus and even bike lanes to ensure that we have more mobility. These things have shown in other cities around the country and even around the Commonwealth to reduce congestion. Lastly, as a matter of equity, I was the first candidate to talk about this, and I'm glad to hear that others are talking about it. Toll equity. We have to ensure that the residents of Winthrop and Revere, who are bearing the brunt of congestion and pollution from traffic coming from the North Shore going into Boston, have reduced prices at the tolls, not just at the Callahan Tunnel, but all over the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Jeff.
Yes, so this problem is going to become even worse in this area when we see the full results of the HYM project at Suffolk Downs. I don't think that we in Winthrop have paid close enough attention to what the impact of that fully developed site will be in terms of traffic for this area. And so, what I would do is work as the state representative for the 19th Suffolk District with people in Revere as well as Winthrop to get them to the table to talk about what is the traffic mitigation plan, what is the way the plan for HYM is to encourage greater use of subways. And I mean, it's obviously right on the blue line. There's 2 train stations there. There'll be linkage from Suffolk Downs and from Beachmont train station. But that's something that is critically important because the traffic backup in this area is going to get considerably worse for our area. The second thing I would do is I think we need to expand the rail system. I'd expand the commuter rail system. This is for sort of system-wide, not just Winthrop and Revere. But I would expand commuter rail because I think that will take more cars off the road. It'll stop a lot of the cars that come from the Gloucester area and come down to Revere and park at the parking lots and the parking garage on the beach and take the subway. I would cut the fares to make it more financially appetizing for people. I do group discounts on the rideshare programs. So there's a lot of things that we can do. But I think we need to keep our eye on the ball. And we need to get Winthrop very involved in this process because to date, I don't believe it has been. Thank you.
Tino.
Pre-pandemic, the drive time from Winthrop to downtown Boston during rush hour was over 90 minutes. Right now, it's 10 minutes. That's unacceptable. We need to figure something out, and that's why I'm a supporter of expanding rail. I have been fortunate enough to serve with Governor Dukakis and former State Rep John Bussinger on the North-South Rail Link Working Group. I'm fortunate enough to receive the endorsement of the MBTA Local 600 transit workers, the folks who are working every day for our MBTA. And I will work with those stakeholders every day to make sure that we extend the Blue Line to Lynn, make sure that the MBTA is more accessible and affordable for all. I also think we need to allow to clean energy, allow tax incentives for those that purchase cars like Tesla, so we reduce the cost of electric vehicles. We also need to make sure that charging stations are more available for these products. Electric vehicles is something that my generation have been moving to. We just need to make sure it's more affordable because it is helping our environment and improving the air that we breathe each and every day.
Thank you. Alicia.
Thank you. This is personal to me as it is to a lot of folks here. I mean, I grew up on the Blue Line. I know a lot of us did, whether going to one of our first jobs or now going to work. And it's important for us to succeed in Winthrop and Revere. And we have faced many challenges with our transportation system here in Winthrop and Revere. And I think we can do a couple different things. First, investment in public transportation agencies such as the MBTA and regional rails, no fare hikes and no schedule cuts, especially during these times where it's so trying on working class folks. We need additional public charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, as well as investment in the electrification of state-funded transit options like public transit buses, like school buses, and like regional rail. We should have high-speed regional rail all across the Commonwealth. And we must integrate micro-mobility options into our 21st century transportation system. Our bike lanes, our bus lanes, our trains, everything should line up and folks should be able to get to work, get to school in a safe and successful manner. And this all should line up. Transportation advocates are already doing this work, already working towards making sure a just transportation system. We just need more champions on Beacon Hill and folks to join this collaborative effort, folks to join the movement. And I'm right there ready to make sure we have an equitable transportation system here in Winthrop and Revere.
Great. Thank you. Okay, question number 12. The order is Jeff, Tino, Alicia, Juan. As we said at the beginning, we were doing 12 questions tonight. This is your last one. Jeff, where do you stand on Massachusetts being a sanctuary state?
I am opposed to Massachusetts being a sanctuary state. I raise my children that the rule of law is critically important, in that we should respect the laws of the Commonwealth and the country. I don't believe that sanctuary state sets the right message to our children, and I think that we can be respectful of people that are here and that are in our communities without handcuffing law enforcement from doing their job and protecting our communities. And I think that it's critically important that we support our public safety community, and that's why I'm so thrilled to have the support of the Winthrop Fire Local and the Revere Fire Local. I'm privileged to have the support of Massachusetts Coalition of Police, privileged to have the support of the New England Police Benevolent Association, because they recognize that I understand, having worked in the public safety community, the critical issues of public safety and making sure that Revere and Winthrop stay safe communities. And so I think sanctuary state and sanctuary city, the country has an obligation to come up with a fix for the immigration system. But the answer is not to have states and localities becoming lawless zones that don't comply with federal law. And I think that that's a regrettable approach to the current immigration crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Tino.
Sanctuary state and sanctuary cities is a political term created by the right wing. And what I support is the Safe Communities Act, which was also endorsed last year by the National Police Chiefs Association here in Massachusetts, and also supported by Senator Boncory, who voted for it in a budget amendment. I think that position that Mr. Turco made is definitely does not reflect the Democratic Party, does not reflect Winthrop and Revere, it does not reflect Senator Boncory and Speaker DeLeo, especially here in Revere. And as a state representative, I'll fight for our entire district. Anyone that's in this country that is here working, they deserve a fast path to citizenship that helps our entire economy. That's why I'll support the Working Families and Mobility Act, just like Juan and Alicia did as they answered that on questionnaires with me, because everyone has a right to a job. I know what it's like to get a call from a school committee member when a student's mother wasn't there when they got home. That can't happen in this country. The worst thing about the Trump administration is what happened at the border. We need to move on from that. The rhetoric has to stop on all sides. In political terms, like sanctuary state is one of them.
Alicia.
Thank you. I support the Safe Communities Act. We need to make sure that everyone who is living here is not afraid. No one deserves to live in fear, especially in the communities here in such a great Commonwealth in the 19th Suffolk District. This is a public health issue. If our immigrant friends and neighbors are afraid to see a doctor or afraid to call the police, if they're experiencing domestic violence, if their children are too nervous to call 911 when there's a fire in their apartment, that is a crisis in our communities. I stand hand in hand with our community activists to call on fellow elected officials to make sure that we pass the Safe Communities Act once and for all this legislative session. I've said it before and I'll say it again. What you'll find in me is a champion. When I say I support something, I won't just be signing my name to co-sponsor it and forget about it. I will be there day in and day out, standing side by side, joining coalitions, and making sure that I'm a champion and bringing my voice to Beacon Hill. And I'm excited to support the Safe Communities Act.
Thank you. Juan.
Betsy, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, I was formerly undocumented. I actually have a personal story about this because someone broke into our house when I was very young and going to our schools, studying with our children, in fact. I was taught that I could trust the police. So I went home when they broke into our home and I told my parents, just call the cops. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And my parents were crying at the dinner table because they were too afraid that they might get deported and we might be separated. The Safe Communities Act engenders trust in our communities. And while some people in this stage might have me or my family separated when I was much younger, we need to support the immigrant population because everyone in our communities comes from an immigrant background. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, everyone. We've completed our questions for this evening. We're now going to move into the closing statements. It was determined earlier by a draw out of a bucket, the different names. And what we have is 2 minutes each, we'll begin with Juan, then it'll be Alicia, then it'll be Tino, and then it will be Jeff. So, Juan.
Sorry, Betsy, I forgot about the mute button sometimes. Thank you again, Betsy, for hosting this and the Winthrop Chamber of Commerce and Winthrop Public Access Television, institutions that make our community strong. My name is Juan Jaramillo, and I'm running to be your next state representative. As I mentioned, I immigrated to the United States fleeing violence. And you, the people of Winthrop and Revere, saved our life. You fed us, you clothed us, you embraced us. You taught us hard work. My parents, like I said, worked 80 hours a week to raise the person that I am. You, along with them, brought me to this point where I'm fighting for you to be your next state representative. Look, the challenges ahead of us are difficult. We're in the middle of a public health crisis and an economic downturn while facing the existential threat of climate change. And these times call for a bold leader that knows how to deliver for the communities of Winthrop and Revere. I've done that as a budget writer in the Massachusetts State Senate, working for Senator Blancouri. Further, I've delivered millions of dollars for coastal resiliency projects to expand access to the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center. and to get initiatives like the Revere Substance Use Disorder Initiative up and running, and for recovery coaches at CASA. I know how to get stuff done. I know the values of our communities. We share them, and I've delivered and organized around them. And I'm proud to be part of this community, the community that saved my family's life. These times call for a leader that will deliver the transformational change that we need. And that's why I'm running to be your leader at the State House. You're the leader at the State House for you, working on your behalf. On March 2nd, I hope that you will vote for me. To learn more about our campaign, visit me at www.juan4rep.com or shoot me a text message or a call at 617-838-7098. I love you guys. Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate this space. Take care.
Thank you, Juan. Alicia.
Once again, thank you to Betsy, Mike, and everyone that came together to discuss the critical issues facing Winthrop and Revere. And thank you to everyone that has worked tirelessly throughout this COVID-19 pandemic to make sure that we are all safe and healthy. As you all know, and as we have heard tonight, there is a lot at stake in this election. Our next state representative has some big shoes to fill. Speaker DeLeo was a tireless fighter for the people of Winthrop and Revere, and we can't thank him enough for his lifelong commitment to serving our community and the Commonwealth in general. As our next state representative, I want to pick up where I left off working in the House of Representatives, fighting for COVID-19 recovery, balanced budgets, increased investment in our schools, our people, our community, and taking aggressive action to fight climate change. We can never settle because when it comes to our community and delivering on the issues that matter most, we just cannot wait. I hope to be a mother someday, and I want to raise that family right here in the place I love. But to ensure that Winthrop and Revere that I grew up in is even better for my future children and those of many in our community, that means we have to take compassionate action. This is not a part-time job. I am running because we need a fighter on Beacon Hill, someone who can roll up her sleeves and get to work full-time to deliver for our community. From day one, you will have a representative who understands the State House and will deliver for us. I look forward to working with all of you to build a brighter future for Winthrop, Revere, and the Commonwealth. Thank you for your time. And in 13 days, on Tuesday, March 2nd, I would be honored to have your vote as our next state representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Tino.
Anyone that knows me knows that my grandfather, Ralph Capobianco, Nani as we called him, was my hero and inspiration. And the only regret I have is that he wasn't here to see this campaign. He didn't have the opportunity to attend public schools. His first job was at 5 years old, shining shoes in Scully Square in downtown Boston. He was married young, raised a family at his first apartment at the Maverick Square projects in East Boston. He served his country. When he came home, he created a small business on Chelsea Street, a convenience store, and bought a triple-decker on Falcon Street in the Eagle Hill section of Boston. He worked at the MDC and retired at the age of 85 years old as a custodian in the Boston Public Schools. His story is the American dream. It's about opportunity, the opportunity to raise a family and make sure they had access to high quality and affordable health care. Make sure that his children had access to the best public education possible. He was a first-generation immigrant, and he was able to provide for his family. And I know he'd be proud of me here, just fighting for the entire community. And as a public elected official, I have been actively involved in our community for decades. And you don't just see me when it's time to run for office. I go to the meetings, I attend the CASA meetings, I attend the games, I donate, I show up, and I've helped make progress on some of the biggest challenges that we face. I bring a track record of results to the table, as well as a thorough understanding of the importance of being accessible to constituents and responsive to the issues they bring. Speaker DeLeo, working in his office, gave me the education of a lifetime on how to fight for his district. And during these uncertain times, experience matters. There's no on-the-job training with me. I'm ready to work for you on day one. And I am humbly asking for your vote on Tuesday, March 2nd, for state representative.
Thank you. Jeff.
Thank you very much, CAT, and thank you, Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, my fellow candidates. One, congratulations on your upcoming wedding. We talked tonight about a lot of big ticket issues, but there's another part of the job that I think we've neglected to talk about, and those are the meat and potato issues. Revere and Winthrop are needy districts where we have people that are in genuine need on a daily basis. I know that. I was one of those people when I was a young kid. Living on Reservoir Ave, we lived a very good life. We had a house down the Cape. We had a house with an in-ground pool. And my parents got divorced. We never thought about people on the other side, so to speak. And all of a sudden, we lose our house and we're going to be homeless. And my mother calls up Billy Reinstein and says, "Billy, what do I do?" And Billy Reinstein says, "Give me an hour." And an hour later, Billy Reinstein says, "Take those kids and go to 84 Walnut Ave." That was government working for me. That was government working for my family. There are people in genuine need every day. And it's important as a state representative not to get so caught up in the big issues of climate change and minimum wage and healthcare that we forget that we're here to serve the people of our district. So I look forward to working on the big issues, but never forgetting the small, because it's in the small where we change people's lives. The second part is I'd like to say is thank you to my friends, my supporters, my family, particularly my wife, Melissa, and my kids. They've sacrificed tremendously with missed breakfasts and missed opportunities to get together and be away here for school vacation week. But I want to urge you to vote for me on March 2nd, because I bring with me a unique experience. Experience as a father, as a husband, as a small business owner, as the only candidate in this race that worked in both the House and the Senate, the only candidate that ran a major state agency, and the only small business owner. I will take that combined experience to work for you, the people of this district, to make Revere and Winthrop a better place to live and our Commonwealth a better place. Jeff Turco, March 2nd, please vote for me, turcoforrep.com. Any questions, 508-450-8843. I promised I wouldn't give my wife's cell phone out. She'd be mad at me if I did. So she got the calls. So please vote for me on March 2nd. Thank you very much. And to my fellow travelers, have a wonderful Lent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tino, Alicia, Juan, Jeff, thank you all very much for spending your time with us, for answering these questions, which again came to us from our residents and our business owners. I know you've got quite a number of these to be doing, but obviously, as it has been said, this is an important position. There's big shoes to fill. So we're really, really pleased and honored that you spent your time with us this evening answering these questions from both of our communities. I just want to say to the general public, thank you very much for watching. If you didn't get a chance to watch this today, I'm sure Mike will air it again, WCAT, either on their YouTube channel, which is WCAT Winthrop, or probably also on channel 22. So you can check their schedule for that. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you being here. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.